Marriage counselors of Reddit. Has a couple ever come in where you knew you couldn't help them? My cousin is a marriage counselor, and she said that most couples visiting her have one person who is trying to rebuild the relationship, and the other one has already mentally packed up and left. The sessions usually turn into grief counseling for the one who hasn't figured out it's over already. My ex and I went to see a marriage counselor. After seeing us a couple times, he had me in for a private session and said, "Honey, some people are better off not married. You're not yet. X has a personality disorder and there's nothing you can do. He doesn't want to change. Get out. Get out now." I was stunned. "But you're a marriage counselor. You're supposed to help us fix our marriage." Well, I was stubborn and kept trying to make it work for a bit longer. But eventually I took the professional advice. Shoulder left way sooner than I did. Used to work for a judge. First case on rotation through divorce court was a couple, both of whom were marriage counselors. For real. This is what I've learned. You cannot have higher expectations for someone than what they have for themselves. And vice versa. I've had clients that frustrated the heck out of me because I set the bar too high. So I thought we weren't getting anywhere. Conversely, I remember one couple I saw where I thought that there was no hope, but somehow they made it work. The bottom line is that going in with preconceived notions is rarely helpful. People are always surprising. Some people seem to have the attitude that if the couple breaks up, the marriage counselor has failed. The counselor's job is to help the couple live their best lives. If that means helping the couple decide to move on, then perhaps that is for the better. Not a counselor, sorry. But the one my parents went to see told them, after 8 weeks, that they should get divorced. In his words, "There is no hope for you two." My parents are very stubborn, so they basically went, "Duck this, no one will tell us how to live our lives." That was 6 years ago and they are celebrating their 27th in a week. More often than you'd think, people come into marriage counseling after they've already decided their marriage is over. Often, people feel pressured to try to fix it by doing professional couples work, when in reality they're just doing it so they can look back after the divorce and be able to say they've done everything they could. If I get that sense, I often ask them if I'm there to help them repair their marriage, or if my job will be to facilitate a healthy divorce process or co-parenting plan. Many couples seem relieved when this comes up, as pretending to do the work of couples therapy is, in that case, just delaying the inevitable. Edit. Also, it's extremely unethical to continue to provide services that will not be of a benefit to them. So, the thought process OP describes would be a terrible example of a therapist referring cases to someone else or simply saying, "I can't help and here's why," is more than okay. I knew a woman in an abusive marriage who talked her husband into going to counseling by saying she'd file charges for him hitting her if he didn't. He left her a few weeks later and she pretty much went off the deep end after that. If ever there was a couple beyond saving, it was them. As my sister said of a friend of hers, sometimes the marriage counselor doesn't help you save your marriage. Sometimes the marriage counselor helps you end the relationship on the best possible terms, which is sometimes very important. Edit. One of those said me which. My dad agreed to go to marriage counseling with my mum, just to tell her he had a mistress and wanted to leave her. Then he got up and left. Must have been pretty awkward for the marriage counselor. That's actually really common experience for marriage counselor apparently. One of my professors talked about how one half of the couple wants to break up and somehow feels better about doing with a counselor so the other person has some support. My so and I are in counseling right now and it's been great. The only issue we had was in the beginning my so thought we would do all of the work in session, but soon realized that no. We do the work and come in for checkups. It's been 2 months and so many things have changed. Actual marriage counselor here. In my experience, the reason that most couples come in is because one spouse wants to salvage the relationship more than the other spouse. So, Generally I will work with the couple to try and rebuild the connection, usually by improving communication skills. That being said, if I notice that a spouse is pulling away and marriage counseling will not work, I will meet with the spouse that is clinging to the marriage and tell them to prepare themselves for a divorce or separation. I usually have that spouse work on making themselves happy and building a life where their happiness is not dependent on someone else. After all is said and done, I refer my clients, as needed, to individual counseling. My ex and I went to counseling, after years of me requesting it. Went to a few sessions together. Then the counselor suggested we each see one independently. I went in for my second solo session and the counselor said that all 3 counselors compared notes and agreed it was the best idea for us to split up. They wished me well and told me that they would stand behind me in a court of law if required. I'm studying to be a marriage and family therapist. From the couples I've dealt with, in order for the therapy to be anything productive, both people in the relationship have to have wanted to go to therapy to work on their relationship. Sadly, a lot of wait too long to ask for help, and when they do actually seek it out, it's only because they both know it's over and it's a last-ditch effort to keep the relationship going for as long as possible. When I was shopping around for marriage counselors, most of them mentioned that their purpose was to help improve the marriage or to assist couples in separating if that was what was best. They were very upfront that saving the marriage wasn't the only option and may not be the best option. My grandma and grandpa were in group marriage counseling where the counselor told everyone in the group their marriages were over. My grandparents got divorced and my grandma ended up marrying the husband from one of the other couples. My grandpa married the counselor. More than 30 years later, they are still in those marriages and way happier than they ever were together. A friend of mine, a father, left his wife for their marriage counselor. I'm pretty sure the counselor knew she couldn't save that marriage. Bonus, he built a new, bigger house down the street from the one he left the mother with. The new one had a pond. When I deliver couples counseling, I always tell the couple from the onset that my job is to help the relationship. But helping the relationship could mean helping the couple end it. It's a lot easier for all involved, me included, to accept the relationship ending as a realistic outcome. They don't get frustrated with each other when things don't get better. And I don't get frustrated if I don't fix the relationship. Not married, but together 6 years. Lived together. Pregnancy and miscarriage early on. We started counseling in the last months. At the end of our sessions I'd always feel like we had made progress. She was always depressed and angry afterwards. Although would say that counseling was helping, I thought it was. Looking back, she had pretty much given up. But our issues were always like that. Generally things that I had to work on. My problems. And I bought into that notion. It's been the toughest year of my life since it fell apart. Once you take responsibility for where you find yourself and where you were, that's when it gets hard. I started my own therapy a couple months before her and I went to a different couples counselor. I went because I was having a really hard time making decisions and felt like I was going kind of crazy. So glad I had my therapist when it all unraveled. It has since shed light on tons of things. I'm a big advocate for therapy. For everyone. Our counselor says there is always hope if both people are willing to change. When we started after about 6 sessions he sat us both down and said basically you are acting as if you are already divorced. You just haven't divided the money and moved out yet. So do you want to do that? Or do you want to fix things? That was humbling. We both decided we wanted to fix it. Been a while. But we are getting there. And before you think moneymaker, this guy is literally half price over anyone else. And for us, more effective than the higher priced ones. He only works part-time and can choose his clients. We have spent a lot, but way cheaper than divorce too. And hey, deep down, we still love each other. We just lost sight of that. We joked ever had a worse couple? And he said he has had some who he cannot help, and tells them so. I know a couple whose marriage was breaking down due to a night where they agreed to swing with another couple. Basically he decided not to go through with it, which surprised me, and she did it. Oops. Anyway, he was angry with her and said he couldn't forgive her. They went to a marriage counselor who instructed him that he was never allowed to mention the night again. I'd always thought that marriage counseling was the opposite. Regardless, they are still together and back on track, so I guess she knew what she was talking about. This is good advice. You cannot agree on something and then change your mind and blame the other person when the agreed upon action takes place. You can change your mind before, but not after the fact. Alright, I gotta do a shout out here. I had a woman help me through my counseling, and I guess I'd have to say I was the one going through the grief counseling. Mine was interesting in the circumstances. You know you've led a crazy life when a seasoned marriage counselor drops jaw at what your spouse has done. But I'll spare the details. I just want to thank you folks who do this for those on the cusp of divorce. I know you've got to go home and feel like hell, wishing you could legally share what wrenched your heart that day. From the other side of the couch, I thank you. At the end of the day, even when the marriage is still ruined, we can look back at you folks and say, damn it, I tried. I didn't just roll over. I did everything I could to save it. 3 years in and I still get comfort. Not from being right or some such bull, but from knowing I tried everything I could. Thanks. My ex and I broke up at our first session of counseling. After 10 years together and years of her hostility, I heard what was coming out of her mouth and broke up right there. I felt terrible about it, as the poor counselor was expecting a standard chat session and it blew up instantly into a relationship ending. I felt so good driving home. My marriage counselor told me that continuing to try to work on marriage was pointless, as she clearly had no interest in fixing issues. So yes, they do. Same thing happened to my mom and dad when they went for counseling. My father had mentally checked out of the relationship and it was obvious. The counselor told my mom that she wanted to start seeing her one-on-one because while the marriage was beyond saving, but she could help my mom because my mom was interested in changing and improving herself. They got divorced and my mom remarried shortly after. My father is still single. I'm not a marriage counselor, but I've been wanting to tell this story since it happened, although I feel like it's going to get buried among the responses at this point. I was in the waiting area for my therapist's office last week, about half an hour early, and on a day I don't usually have counseling. I travel a long way to see my therapist, but she really gets me and has been an incredible help with my anxiety and OCD. Truthfully, that day I was in a pretty bad mood because of the heat we've been having in Seattle, as well as travel time, and could totally empathize with people feeling a little snappish. Anyway, I'm sitting in a little chair and the guy next to me is obscured by a giant bouquet of fake flowers and is tinkering around on his phone kinda loudly. Bad mood me challenging him by aggressively flipping the pages of the Brothers Karamazov. When his girlfriend walks in, gets right on his lap, and starts making out. A couple of, what feels like, minutes, and they break away. And she goes and sits in my line of vision and they start bickering. I can't remember their exact conversation, but they fought so badly I was starting to think if I said something they'd bring out the punked cameras on me. Like, it ranged from, why did you bring that water bottle when I said I'd get you iced tea? Are you trying to make me look like an insensitive jerk of a boyfriend? What's wrong with you? To, I don't want you hanging out with that group anymore after what you did to me. To, well then maybe you should find some new friends. Mark was trying to heal my ducking dog anyway. To, you're going to dinner with Alicia? Are there going to be men there? I don't know. You know how you get when you've had a couple of drinks. All of this with me clearly in the room trying to read and not gawk while they rip each other apart. When my therapist came downstairs to call me in, they had flipped, were discussing moving in together. Holy duck. I think they were beyond hope.